Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Friday's edition of Scotland at 7 on the 26th of March. Joining me this evening, my two guests are Julie Coombe. Welcome back to the programme, Julie.
Hi.
And
How
also
are you?
I'm very well, Julie, thank you. Yeah,
Good,
yeah.
good.
And also joining us this evening, Siobhan Tolland. Hi, Siobhan, how are you?
Not bad, thanks. How are you?
Okay, well, listen, we're going to crack on, ladies, with the show. First of all, the coronavirus update, which we will have a chance to discuss later on. So, as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,798,430 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK regional government testing centres since the beginning of the pandemic. Of these, 1,582,288 have been confirmed negative. 216,142 have tested positive. There are 543 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. Now, as usual, not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 6 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. The number of patients in Scotland who have now died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,578. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 296 were in hospital last night, 26 of whom were in intensive care. Now, as of 8 o'clock this morning, 2,222,832 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 279,814 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 126,515 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 70 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just in hospitals. Siobhan, let me first have a chat to you this evening. The COVID figures, we don't normally discuss them in any great detail, but of course, with the election looming and potentially a referendum coming shortly after that, it's important, isn't it, for us to be able to see these figures coming down, and they do seem to be coming down every week now.
Yeah, I think so. It was leveling off a wee bit. A couple of weeks ago, Scotland was actually slightly higher than England, which was slightly unusual, but it is kind of dipping. And I noticed today, I think it was like 2.1%. There's some areas still quite high though. West Lothian was quite high. It's sitting about 211 per 100,000. So there are kind of some pockets there of still quite high infection, but it is getting better, and there is a sense of relief, I think, especially with the vaccination and the fact that we kind of know what we're dealing with a little bit more. I mean, it's only been a year since lockdown. If we think of the fear that we experienced back then, at least we're in some knowledge. But here I was today, my son was at school for just one day, and then when he was there, we got an email saying there's been a case in the school, so that kind of raises the spectre there again. What is interesting and maybe slightly frightening is that it is the younger people now that seem to be where the infections seem to be increasing, and that's under 14 and under, as well as the kind of 25 and above as well. So we do have to be quite careful there, because as the vaccine in the older generation gets put out through the population, the virus needs to go somewhere, and it
has fewer people to infect, and those who it can infect are those who are not vaccinated.
Exactly. So we do need to be careful there as well. And I think caution at all costs,
Yeah. Julie, we're also seeing a vast decrease in the number of deaths, and most of the deaths appear to be happening in hospital. I mean, the death today that were announced, I think there's 6 new reported deaths. So we're getting down near to the level that we were at last summer. Hopefully we'll see these decreasing still further.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, echoing exactly what Siobhan was saying, I've been hearing a lot of friends who, like, the whole family's got COVID at the moment because their kids are back at school, and it does seem to be kind of circulating around and the kids a bit and the young people, and yes, caution, because we're nearly there. I'm getting my vaccine next week. So that
Congratulations.
means I've got round to do. It means I've got round to doing the 30-year-olds, Gordon. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course, really, yeah. I thought you were younger than that, actually.
Oh, I know.
No, under 20s are getting it.
Yeah, April the 1st, so I hope it's not a prank. But yeah, getting my back, very excited. And we are getting there. And, you know, what Siobhan was saying about it kind of levelling off a wee bit. My husband had said that because we look at the figures, because we're desperate for it all to get back to normal so that the theatres can get open and we can get working again, and you know, confidence building. And I think that we need to be cautious so that we can properly get back to normal without any other waves getting us.
What Siobhan was just saying about the fact that with so many of the older generation, I include myself in this incidentally, already having been vaccinated, the virus doesn't have as many people to infect now, and it can only really transmit through the unvaccinated and probably the young. Do we have any information on how it's affecting young people? Have you heard any stories anecdotally?
Well, just like the friends that I have, they've all got really young children, and it seemed to be that it wasn't. Thankfully, it wasn't affecting them very badly. I mean, obviously, if you get a virus like this, this virus has crept up and manifested itself in really odd ways and exposed underlying health conditions that sometimes people didn't know were there. But I think if you're fairly fit and healthy, then you can probably deal with it. And I think that's thankfully most of the population. But I think you're about 3 weeks or something before you get your immunity from your vaccine.
Yes, 21 days, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly noticed when they started vaccinating all the older people at our local surgeries and all that, my local Tesco looked like the set of Cocoon. And they were all down there. They were down there.
What a lovely image you've just conjured up there, Julie. That's the nicest description I've heard of it so far.
But yeah, and I was like, oh, the vaccines are coming in. But I was thinking, please be cautious, because, you don't get... But we will get there.
Okay.
And I can totally understand them being happy about it.
Okay.
There is...
Yeah, but I'm just being told there that hospital deaths as well are coming down, Julie. So the numbers are creeping down gradually everywhere at the moment.
It's brilliant. All good news. All
so
good news.
Apparently less than 300 in hospital in Scotland as we're speaking tonight. Sorry, Julie, what were you going to say?
No, it was Siobhan that was wanting to say something there.
Siobhan, I beg your pardon.
Sorry, I mean, just in a slightly pessimistic note of caution here is that, if we look at what Boris Johnson said just only a few days ago, that, there is a expected third wave in Europe, and that's a problem because it can kind of cause problems for the vaccine efficacy. But his attitude towards that was, well, it's going to land on our shores, so be it. Completely, according to Kit from Independent Stage, completely abdicating responsibility in terms of trying to stop the onslaught of a new virus or a new variant coming in to the shores of Britain. And I think that Scotland really has to make some tough decisions in terms of borders there, because I don't think we can afford another wave that's been brought in by the recklessness of Westminster. I mean, their border control is sloppy, to say best. This lapsadaisical, well, if it happens, it happens attitude. We've got that to contend with, and I think that that's quite a difficult one. I think it's also, maybe takes us on to one of the next things, but it's also a significant topic for the election as to who do we put our faith in.
Indeed, it's a question of trust, isn't it, Siobhan?
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to ask you there, though, is that with the quarantine regulations in place in Scotland at the moment, it is mandatory now to go into quarantine as soon as you step off a plane from anywhere outside of the United Kingdom, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the question is it the same in England as it is here, or is it a different system now? Because I think many people are confused by this.
Well, they have red zoned countries, don't they? The ones that they consider
Yeah.
to be high in infection. But of course, as most public health organisations will tell you, Independent Station being one of them, is that doesn't necessarily work because, especially if it's a new variant, or how do we know which
Yeah.
countries are going to be the high rates the next day? So you could be letting people in, and they're coming from a country that was
Yeah.
particularly low, but now brings in a variant.
And uh,
It's
Siobhan, I was
it's
just going to say, is it right to say that there is still this potential hole in the defences whereby people coming in from one of the, say, the green zones into, I don't know, into an airport like Heathrow can then get the
yeah.
train up to Scotland across the border and get in? Is that correct?
Well, I think that's what happened with the Brazil when the Brazilian variant
Uh-huh.
came into Scotland, didn't it? Just a wee while ago. I mean, thankfully the people were really sensible and came off the plane. It was Brazil, I think it was via Paris, London, then here, I think.
Uh-huh.
But they were sensible to go and isolate for the 10 days. Then obviously they ended up taking the taking the COVID. So that actually stopped the community transmission happening. But
Uh-huh.
that's exactly what happened is it came from Brazil, which is one of the countries that,
But
in the red zone, but came via those stops that just managed to bypass that process.
okay, well, hopefully, whoever ends up being the new Scottish Government will take action to make sure that that hole is plugged. Anyway, it's time for us to move on to our next big headline this evening, and that, of course, is that Alex Salmond has launched a new list party. The former First Minister, Alex Salmond, today launched a new pro-independence party to run in May's parliamentary election. Opinion polls in the last 12 months have shown historically high support for independence. The May the 6th election is seen as a critical test of public sentiment in Scotland, with an opportunity for the Scottish National Party to return a majority government and increase pressure on Boris Johnson over an independence referendum. Announcing the new party in a statement broadcast on Twitter, Alex Salmond said its aim was to maximise the number of pro-independence MSPs in Holyrood. Julie, let me come to you first of all for your reaction to this. Were you surprised by this, first of all?
Oh, I would like to say that I was surprised, but actually, from Alex Salmond's behaviour of late, no, I'm not. I mean, yesterday his headline was he was taking the government to court again. And now he's setting up. I mean, this is obviously been manoeuvring for this for a while. Um, I I'm incredibly disappointed in his behaviour. It's I can't say what I want to say on this programme because I have my own opinion about what's driving his behaviour, but I feel I feel it's just a toxic thing. But I mean, I know he's saying, oh, it's to fill the parliament with all the these pro-independence MPs, but do not think that is what's behind it. I think that it's division that's behind it. I think it's jealousy that's behind it. I think there's toxic masculinity behind it. But there you go. I probably angered lots of viewers even saying
Well,
that.
Julie,
But
everybody is entitled to an opinion, and if this show is about anything, it's about listening to those opinions. Siobhan, do you share Julie's concerns about this new party?
No, really, no.
Stop laughing, Siobhan,
Sorry,
please.
I'm sorry. I'm because I'm the same as Julie in that I suppose I should try and be very tactful here. This is hubris in the extreme, isn't it? And I was actually just reading a quote by Alex Massey, and I think that's kind of really quite hit the nail on the head when he's talking about, there's something really quite sad when yesterday's man stands up and tries to revive his career. And
Uh-huh.
there was something quite, I thought, sad to look at that today. And
Yeah.
what's interesting, of course, is when you look at Alex Salmond's speech in the Parliament Committee, and you look at his opening speech, then it all makes sense, doesn't it? Because it all became a political speech. If you look back on that speech,
Uh-huh.
independence can only really happen with type of structure. Do we really want independence if, this is the government in power, etc., etc. It all makes sense now. So what we've got is if we look backwards, he used that evidence as a political posturing speech. to push forward his own political ego. And we see that now with the launch of this party, which they've mispronounced as well, but we'll not get into that.
The Alpa Party.
Yes. I mean, toxic masculinity, yes. I mean, Julie, I'm absolute in agreement with you. There's something quite disturbing here that a man who was found innocent of the crimes, but paid no heed or concern or sympathy to the victims in any way throughout his when he was questioned, to stand up and create a new party. But here's the funny part, right? Because in during this kind of saga with the committee, there was a poll, and Nicola Sturgeon was obviously still really high in the popularity stakes. Alex Salmond had a lower popularity than Boris Johnson. Come on, how does this guy honestly think that he's going to build a kind of this super independence majority? It's delusional, I think. But here's the serious issue here. The SNP and the independence movement is on a political knife edge. Okay, we need to win this. We need to win this. Okay, the SNP is the only vehicle we have, in addition with the Greens, the only realistic vehicle we have to win a majority in Parliament that will guarantee us an independence referendum. It will tell the world that that's what we need, and that's on a white knife edge, and that's at risk. Okay, for these parties and for Alex Salmond to kind of pop in at this stage and upset that apple cart, as it were, we could lose this. We could lose this through kind of errant list seats, etc., etc. And here's the thing, and it was something that never quite crossed my mind until my brother was saying this the other day to me, that if we don't get a majority, then there is a possibility of a unionist coalition in Parliament. That's not out with the realms of possibility. Then we've lost it.
So because the nightmare scenario,
It is the nightmare scenario. So we need to be very, very careful. And I know I've said this numerous times on this show before. Both votes SNP. It absolutely has to be. I know that there's a lot of people not happy with the SNP. I know that, and probably that's quite justified under some circumstances. But we can never get a movement that we're going to be 100% happy of. The SNP is the only vehicle we have at this stage. It's the only thing that will guarantee it for us. And we really need to start understanding the importance of what this election will do for us. Because if we lose this now, we've lost it for a generation. And that's not a flippant one, but I do genuinely think, it's almost cliched now, we need to win this.
Okay, Siobhan. So, Julie, Siobhan just saying there that the stakes now have never been higher, and it's more important than ever for us to be united if we want an independence referendum to happen. I feel that Mr. Salmond here, in his timing of this, seems to have taken a bit of a leaf out of the book of the UK government, which likes to try and sabotage the SNP at critical moments. Do you feel that he's doing that here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, I saw a tweet yesterday that said, I'm looking forward to when Alex Salmond is pretending to be a cat on Celebrity Big Brother. and well, yeah, if that was all that was going to happen, that'd be great. But, we're laughing, but I do appreciate so much what Siobhan's saying. This is a really, really serious time. And I've said before on the show, there's always going to be infighting. That's what happens. Personalities, and politics is personalities. And I think we have to have our eye on the common goal. We have to get our independence, and then they can fight like rats in a sack. But don't tear ourselves apart from within. I think this is incredibly orchestrated. I think, for me, Alex Salmond, I haven't been able to take him seriously since the Russia Today programme. I think he's making a fool of himself, but there'll be other people who don't. But everything he does is orchestrated to the nth degree to have maximum
PR
power,
impact,
shall we say, be it positive or destructive. And I think I think he's shocking, actually.
Julie,
He's here
can
now.
can I ask you this? Now that Alex Salmond has invented a new party, this ALPA party, that now makes, at my count, at least 4 pro-independence list parties that have been created in the last, year or so, which means that the limited pool of people who would vote for them in the list has now been reduced by a factor of 4. So surely the Salmon Party and the other smaller parties are now even less likely now to win a single seat.
Well, that's the risk they run. I mean, I totally agree with Siobhan. If you are pro-Indy, which I am, it's 2 votes SNP. I think, obviously the Greens are pro-Indy, which is great, but I just think that it's completely destructive what he's doing. And it's almost as, hubris is a lovely word and we study it in drama and you go back to the Greeks. Now, we all know what happens to the folk who have hubris. And I think Mr. Salmond needs to read Act 5 of Macbeth.
Okay, but that's an excellent point probably to leave this particular discussion and move on to our next story this evening. Okay, so the SNP is to deliver a national care service if re-elected. The SNP's leader, Nicola Sturgeon, today promised major reforms to adult social care as a part of Scotland's recovery from COVID-19. Addressing the COSLA conference, Ms Sturgeon confirmed that one of the first acts of a re-elected SNP government will be to begin work on a national care service. She's also pledged to abolish charges for non-residential care, to ease the financial pressure on those accessing care and to support their right to independent living. Praising the dedication and professionalism of social care workers during the pandemic, Ms Sturgeon confirmed that an SNP government would deliver a national wage for carers. In government and in partnership with local authorities and health boards, the SNP government has already integrated health and social care in the biggest shake-up since the founding of the NHS. Julie, let me come to you first for this. This is an interesting idea. The idea of having a national care body, I don't think has been done before, has it? This is new.
I don't think, Siobhan will be a lot more knowledgeable than I am about this, but I think it kind of goes hand in hand with this sort of socialist government that the SNP are building, have built and continue to build under Nicola Sturgeon. There's a really interesting letter in The Guardian, actually, last week I think it was, that said, like, Jacinda Ardern gets lauded all the time for building this socialist government, and yet The Guardian are always having a go at Nicola Sturgeon.
For doing the same thing.
And actually it's happening, the same sort of government is happening here. Our social care is already the envy of the UK. When I've been working down south, people, they have this assumption that they're paying for it all, which is absolute nonsense.
Because that's what they're told, isn't it?
What they're told, yes. I remember having to get a prescription when I was on tour, sort of dragging myself in to this chemist, getting this prescription for a chest infection. And he heard my accent, obviously, and he said, "We don't do it free here." And I was like, okay, thanks, just give me the pills, mate. But, you just think...
Is that something to boast about?
I know, exactly. Anything that is socially responsible is good in my book. Yeah. And, I think that we are good, and, this commitment is more, and I really hope that it happens. I hope they are returned, and I hope that this new care body comes into being, because it's, we've got an population and all that kind of thing, and we need it.
Okay, fair enough. Siobhan, would you agree with Julie's assessment that a national social care body is needed?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a common sense approach to a problem that we've had for a long time, and I think that COVID is one of the situations that's thrown up some of the issues that we've had by not having a national social care service. We need that kind of we need a minimum standard of care. We need a kind of we need that kind of leveling off across the board. I think there's another side to this which never really crossed my mind until it was Shona Robison was given a talk on a wellbeing economy, and we ended up talking about this, the kind of bringing the nationalisation of the care service. And it's actually something that's very, very positive for young people as well, because how she was explaining this, which I think is great, is that what you've got at the moment is you've got kind of a very kind of disparate care structure, depending on where you're going, et cetera, depends on what your wages are. But once you bring that into the kind of national care structure, what you've got is young people moving in within an NHS structure that offers a distinct career path. Because you move into that whole NHS structure, you'll have kind of better wages, there'll be better holiday, better sick pay, those kind of things. There's much more stability within that process. So it's not just that it helps the older folk as it should, and we need to look after our older, and we do have, as Jules was saying, a caring an older population.
Siobhan,
it allows us a career path for our younger generation.
So what are you saying, Siobhan, that the social care element of the health service is now going to be sort of included in the NHS, so it becomes the National Health and Social Care Service?
Well, that's my understanding, is that because it would come under that remit. That certainly was one of the kind of possibilities that Shona had been talking about. So yes. I
was just going to say, Siobhan, if that's the case, then that would bring social care workers into the public sector pay grades, would it not?
I think so. Yeah.
And that could only be a good thing, because that's going to lift their standard of living, lift their wages greatly, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think that, and it's stability as well, isn't it, as well? So it's things like, holiday pay, sick pay, those kind of things too. But yes, that's certainly my understanding. Well, that was certainly one of the options that's been discussed, and I think that would be something that we certainly could.
But
I'm beginning to doubt that.
I was going to say, Siobhan, but we have currently got a fragmented care service, partly privatised and partly run by local authorities. Am I right?
Yeah. So, there's some that's run by local authorities and some not. Yeah.
So whatever comes out of this is going to have to build a new model, perhaps where these private sector care homes are providing services under the umbrella of this new National Health and Social Care Service.
Yeah. Do you know, it's got so much possibility, hasn't it?
It does.
It kind of just opens up how it comes back to that well-being structure again. And it's interesting that Jules talks about the kind of path to socialism, but I always see the well-being as a kind of socialistic, the modern socialism, as you were not, caught up in the ties of the past.
I was going to say, bringing social care into the public sector would, to a large extent, uplift many, many thousands of social care workers who at the moment are earning minimum wage, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it can only be a good thing.
It's exactly, and it comes back to what Julie was saying, it's a socially responsible structure, isn't it? And that's what we want now. It's, I think people's priorities have changed, haven't they? And I think COVID has maybe just clarified that a little bit, is that security and stability, I think, is something that we all want now. And I think we give, through doing that structure and through, we give that stability in lots of different ways.
Would you say, Siobhan, that bearing in mind that the Scottish Government has already given the NHS workers a 500% thank you payment, and they've also now promised them a 4% pay rise, this is taking it to the next level, isn't it? Because this is now saying, not only do we value you a lot more highly, and so do the public, we're going to demonstrate that by bringing you into the health service so that you can enjoy the same benefits, the same union memberships as the NHS staff do.
I think so. I think my understanding is that it's also 5.2% for the lower
for the lowest
as well.
paid, yes.
Yeah. So in that respect, that's not bad. I mean, to be honest, I can't remember I had I can't remember the last time I had that level of pay rise, put it that way. But, having said that, I'm relatively well paid, so I'm kind of lucky in that respect. But yeah, it's a good start, isn't it? And, I said this a couple of times before. It's like, thank we're NHS workers with a half decent pay rise, and it's good that the SNP have announced that. I think it is a good thing. It's a thank you. And it's like you say, they had that £500 thank you bonus, but they do deserve so much more, to be honest.
Pay rise, yeah.
They
certainly,
do.
This would create a new covenant between the government, the people, and the people who serve them, I guess, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think it would. I think that's exactly it, isn't it? It's a new social contract that we're building, or actually rebuilding, as maybe Julie hinted at earlier on. It's this rebuilding of a social contract that we've lost through the post-Thatcher years.
Okay, well, let's leave that subject there. Our next topic actually is linked to the first one. The IPPR Scotland has recommended a minimum income guarantee. A new report from IPPR Scotland today set a new direction for social security provision in Scotland that aims to secure a living income for all, delivered through a minimum income guarantee alongside action to deliver good work for more people and to reduce costs through stronger collective services. The report includes a proposal for realising a minimum income guarantee, or MIG, for Scotland in 2030, and, just as crucially, some of the first steps towards that can be taken in the next Parliament. They outline three key features of a minimum income guarantee. The first one is a minimum income guarantee is a universal guarantee delivered through a targeted payment. An MIG should aim to realise a minimum acceptable standard of living for everyone, recognising different needs. The MIG should be designed to reduce poverty, inequality and insecurity as a payment people can rely on. To meet the long-term aspirations of delivering a minimum income guarantee, would need further powers over both social security and tax in Scotland. The report outlines first steps that could be taken within Scotland's existing powers and options for raising tax revenue to help deliver them. I think this time, Siobhan, I'll start with you. Again, this is another fairly new idea, I guess, is to try to uplift everybody's income across Scotland. It's been talked about. We've also spoken about UBI, the Universal Basic Income. Is this a step towards that?
I only just heard about this today, but that's what I was thinking, is how this connects in with that idea of the universal basic income. I think that in theory it's great, but as long as it is a realistic minimum income guarantee. Like for instance, we could talk about the minimum wage, and it's like, well, really, is the minimum wage the living wage? It's not really in that kind of sense. But yes, I think it's that uplifting, and it's making I'm looking at the IPBG. Am I getting that wrong? I'm terrible with names. The report that did it talked about basically just and a complete anti-poverty initiative, and how this can become so important in terms of reducing the poverty that we've got. I do think, and I do think this, and I think that this is where I am absolutely aligned with the SNP is the next government, because I think that that's where they stand, is that vulnerable people first, and that's where I think we have to think in terms of our societies, and something like a minimum income guarantee, as long as it's a good one, fits that criteria for me, because what it does is it helps vulnerable people get out and come away from the vulnerabilities that are imposed upon them, because vulnerability is socially imposed.
Okay, Julie, it seems to me, just reading back through part of the script, that the universal basic income is not what we're talking about. This minimum income guarantee is a method of topping up people's income to bring it up to an acceptable level. But it also says recognising different needs. Now, this element of looking at an individual's circumstances is something that's been missing, isn't it, from social security, universal credit, and all sorts of other things for years.
Yeah. I mean, I it's very interesting when you were reading out the findings of the IPPR group. For you to call it social security, it kind of gladdens my heart, because I hate.
Yeah.
I used to work in the DHSS before I went to drama school, but social security seems much more kind than benefits. If you know what I
Yes.
mean. When that term sort of stopped and it became benefits, like people are living on benefits, and you think it's never a benefit to be that vulnerable, as Siobhan says, and to have to rely
It's a
on the
misnomer,
state
isn't
for
it, Julie? It's not a benefit to be poor.
Absolutely, it's not a, and I mean, I grew up with a single parent family. My mum, like, oh, I've never taken anything from anybody. One of these kind of
Yes.
brilliant, strong Scottish women. And I've always worked.
Too proud to accept help.
Absolutely. Even when she needed it, she was too proud to accept help. But I think there is that kind of stigma still, and the fact that I went to the STUC conference a couple of years ago, the women's conference, and there was an awful lot about universal credit, and I think what you're saying, Gordon, about looking at people individually is very important, because universal credit is not a one size fits all. Nothing is ever like
Yeah.
that. But like Siobhan was saying, if it's a realistic minimum income guarantee, and
Yes.
that has to be a genuinely realistic
So
minimum income.
would you say, Julie, that at the moment things like universal credit provide, how can we put this, subsistence living? It's not a living wage or a living income, is it? It's just enough to survive, but there's nothing left in your pocket at the end of the week.
Well, I mean, I am fortunate enough to not know exactly how universal credit works, but I found out an awful lot about it at that particular conference. You see, I'm self-employed,
Yes.
all actors and writers and performers, and when you're self-employed, universal credit just doesn't work. It doesn't. I mean, you're gubbed, basically. You are absolutely gubbed if you're going for that. And I think it's just not fit for purpose at all. From what the sort of terribly sad stories that I was hearing, really frustrating stories that I was hearing at that particular conference, I think there was one story that was positive, that it had worked for this particular family,
Uh-huh.
and that's not a system. That is not a system. If if there's one
Yeah.
success story.
So it's not a system which is working well at the moment, and as you say, not one size fits all. Siobhan, before we leave the subject, the idea of tailoring social security, and also as Julie was saying, trying to remove the stigma that's attached to it. Words like dole, words like benefit, even words like credit, all make it sound like we are borrowing money from somebody else, don't they?
And you know what? And totally, absolutely agree with what you were saying there, Julie. That the language here is so important, because it represents two very different cultures, doesn't it? And I think the Scottish Government have turned it into social security deliberately for that reason. The words like benefit and stuff, like you say, there's a power dynamic there. It's a handout by the state to the person, and they should be damn grateful for it. And that is the tone behind that kind of language. But social security is about stability, it's about security, and it's about everyone taking responsibility for everyone else. It's that post-45 collective culture again, that we think in terms of we rather than the individual. It's not handouts. This is what's best for everybody, because we all need, at one point in time, we've all been down on our luck. When I was really, really ill about 10 years ago, and was off work for months and months, and I had to work 2 days a week because I was so ill, I got tax credits, and that, absolutely grateful to that, because it allowed me to survive, basically, because I was too ill to work. I had a very young baby, and
Of course, we have to recognise, Julie, the reality nowadays is that many working people are having to rely on tax credits. So we have something which we didn't have before, which is in-work poverty, something which was unheard of in the 1970s and 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever watch any of the stuff. It's Robert Reich, the American
Yes,
guy, and he
yes,
was
I've seen
saying
his stuff.
absolutely, in this day and age, he was talking about families in America working 3 jobs and still being in poverty. And he was
Yeah.
saying that should not be, and it absolutely should not be. And I think social security means social responsibility, and
Yeah.
I think we've got a long way to go to get it right. But let's hope that we're going in the right direction.
Well, even just as you say, changing the name of it to back to social
Yeah,
security, tells people that it's something that they can expect. It's something which will keep them safe. And that is basically what the
yeah.
first responsibility of a government is it not? Anyway, on the same topic, a little bit, I suppose, we're now moving to our next story, which is about Asda workers who've won a key victory in an equal pay dispute. Workers at Asda superstores won a key victory in a long-running dispute over equal pay today, with United Kingdom's top court ruling that they can compare themselves to staff at the group's distribution centres. The law firm Lee Day is representing 44,000 current and former Asda shop floor workers in an equal pay claim against Britain's third largest supermarket group, in what is seen as a test case ahead of similar cases against the UK's other big supermarket groups. Asda appealed to the Supreme Court against the Court of Appeal judgment in 2019 that lower paid store staff, who are mostly women, could compare themselves with more highly paid distribution centre workers who are mostly men in pay claims. That ruling followed defeats for Asda in the Employment Tribunal and Employment Appeals Tribunal. The Supreme Court's ruling today only relates to the first part of the Asda workers' claim, and a full legal process could take several years. Julie, this is an interesting one, isn't it? This is another one of these levelling up stories where female workers who traditionally been paid the least have won the right to equal pay to their male counterparts in another part of the supply chain of the supermarket. Surely this has to be a landmark, another landmark if we needed one, in the battle for women to have equal pay.
Well, a landmark, but it's not a final decision.
No.
It's just a step on the way. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens. I think Asda's just been bought over as well, hasn't it?
They are now
It's
owned
changed.
by Walmart, the American giant.
Well, no, I think
Have
they've
they been
been. I
bought
think
over
they've changed
again?
that. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it'd be very, very interesting. Obviously, Siobhan and I are both will be right, right in there, the maiden Dagenham women. But I think it will
I,
be very interesting to
Julie,
see how
I
it
find
goes
it
because a lot of
astonishing that in 2021 women are still having to fight for equal rights.
it's actually quite exhausting. Um, but we're not going to stop. Uh,
Why should you?
you know, you never get that tired. But I mean, I remember years ago, when I was just graduated and I was doing a panto, and I was being paid more than my husband actually because we were in different pantos, and it was the late lamented Jimmy Logan, who was an absolutely dear man. He said to my husband, "Your wife's on stupid money, funny money." And that's ridiculous. You should be on more money. And I thought, well, it's Jimmy that's employing him, so he can easily rectify it. But he was saying, that the women are not the breadwinners. And I think, well, actually, I grew up with a woman who was the breadwinner. She was, so that's archaic. It's absolutely
Julie,
ridiculous attitude.
Julie, perhaps you should have said to Jimmy Logan if he was playing a dame, he should have been paid less then.
I think Jimmy was doing it for the sheer love, but it's ridiculous that we're doing. I think there'll be a lot of people running scared. Tesco, Sainsbury, all that, and I hope that there isn't a kind of pressure. I hope there isn't a kind of rounding on, all circling the legal wagons and stopping this going further, because it's ridiculous, quite frankly.
Yeah. Siobhan, if I could come to you, I'm reminded here actually of the case where Glasgow City Council
Yeah.
fought a long-running legal battle against equal pay for their female workers, and they lost that as well, didn't they? Do you think this is now
Yeah.
the start of the scales tipping the other way in the balance of pay for women?
No.
You don't think so?
And
Well, fair enough.
no, and I'm going to say, and because I think that, do you know what? Good on these women, right? Good on the women in Glasgow City Council and worked for Glasgow City Council as well, and good on these Asda women that are fighting this battle. Because a lot of the times when we talk about inequality, and when we talk about unequal pay, where the debate tends to be is that, oh dear, can the boardrooms only fill with 6 women when it should have been 7 women, and women aren't hitting the glass ceiling. But what we've got here is in the Asda case and with the Glasgow City Council is we've got relatively poorly paid women being paid even less than what they
Yes.
should be being paid. And good on them for fighting that. And we were talking just earlier on about kind of anti-poverty and having to work so many wages, etc., etc. Well, if Asda, and other organisations and other companies paid their staff better money, then maybe we wouldn't necessarily be in that position. And really good on the women. And the reason I say it's not really going to tip the balance is because there will be hundreds more battles like this being fought across the board. It's an interesting one because I think that what it comes down to is this automatic gendered assumption that just what men do is better. It's just
Julia,
it's
Julia,
just more,
and both you ladies, as I say, I'm one of these people who have never understood this gender pay disparity at all. In the course of my very long working life, I have worked probably with more men than women, and in many cases, women who were far more skilled than I was. So I have no assumptions based on gender, and I find it hard to believe that men in this day and age can still harbour these sorts of misogynistic attitudes. Do you think that this attitude is changing? Do you think men are changing their attitudes, and are we seeing perhaps the last hurrah of the misogynists in business?
I don't think it's men. I think it's institutional.
Yeah.
Which is slightly more deeply bedded and maybe less blaming of individual men, if that makes sense.
Do you think women
seems to be part of that structure?
Do you think women are partly to blame in the past for accepting the situation in the first place?
No, because I think women have had a hell of a lot of battles to fight, and they're fighting on every single front. Julie was talking about coming from a single parent family. You've got a lot of women that have very little childcare, low wages. They tend to be more in poverty than men are. So there's lots and lots of issues, especially for kind of poorer women. There's a lot of kind of discrimination, a lot of kind of hard stuff that women have to deal with. So let's not blame the women for their poor pie.
Fair enough. I've one more thing to put to you, Julie, this time, and that is, I don't know whether you've noticed, but since the Scottish Government came to power, it has gradually been increasing the amount of childcare being made available to women. They made big promises, and certainly in my local area, I've seen 2 massive new early years centres being built in order to give young working mothers the ability to go to work if they want to and know that their children will be looked after. Do you feel that maybe the Scottish Government is taking this more seriously now than any previous administrations have?
I think undoubtedly they are. And, early years provision is so good. It's funny, we've been clearing out our spare room, and we found loads and loads of stuff that I'd kept for the boys. Both of them, one of them's 25 and they're 22, but all their wee stuff from primary school. Yep. And it kind of took me back to the nursery provision that they had, and it's just second to none, and that's a long time ago, and there's so much more now, and I think that it's incredibly important, as you say, to give people the opportunity to be able to go back to work or even
just have some respite.
Well, there is. Now, we all love our children, but yes, it can
You need some time for yourself.
But I think the childcare thing is really, really important. We put a motion as a union actually about that for childcare for people in the performing arts, because it's quite for flexible childcare. Because that is kind of different for us,
of course.
and we got a lot of support for it. But there's groups of parents in the performing arts that tended to help one another out. But actually, we were campaigning it for it to be more official than that, because when it's just groups of parents, it's too much for one person just to do it, or a group of people just to. So you need to make it on a more official basis. But it is a really, really important thing. Take care of them when they're that age. It allows your workforce, bigger workforce, and it just makes for a better society, I think.
Okay,
so good on.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, well, listen, we need to move on quickly to our next story. Moving to the United States this time, and US civil rights groups are to sue Georgia over sweeping new voting restrictions. A coalition of civil rights groups has filed a federal lawsuit challenging Georgia's sweeping new voting restrictions, arguing that the Republican-backed law is intended to make it harder for people, particularly black voters, to vote. Among other limits, the law imposed stricter identification requirements, limited drop boxes, gave lawmakers the power to take over local elections, and shortened the early voting period for all runoff elections. It also makes it a misdemeanor for people to offer food and water to voters waiting in line. The legislation has alarmed Democrats who just months ago celebrated historic wins in the presidential election and 2 state campaigns in Georgia that helped to deliver the White House and the US Senate control to their party in Washington. The complaint was filed in Atlanta federal court just hours after legislation became law on Thursday by the New Georgia Project, Black Voters Matter Fund, and Rise Inc. Mark Elias, a Democratic lawyer who spearheaded the party's election legal efforts last year, is representing the groups. Briefly, if you would, Siobhan, this is an interesting one. Do you feel that the Republicans in Georgia are trying to kind of gerrymander the voting system here?
It's the same old tactics, isn't it? We were saying this when the American elections happened, that, talking about how fragile democracy is. And I think we've just got an example of how fragile it can be. Here's yet another example of, which is a racially,
it's a racially
motivated example here, yes, that is basically trying to marginalise people from their voting rights. Now, it's not that long ago. It isn't really, historically speaking, it's not that long ago that black people were demanding the rights, and so these are massive, massive steps backwards for all civil rights within America, and actually for democracy. And it's not so surprising because, yes, Donald Trump is gone, but his legacy will have many, many ripple effects, I think, for probably a good few decades since.
Okay, Julie, would you agree with that assessment that Donald Trump's toxic legacy is still hanging around like a bad smell?
Well, yeah, I mean, he didn't do it all himself. He had people that agreed with him and helped put him there. I'm not surprised. And it's very quick to try and make sure it doesn't happen again, isn't it?
Well, let's hope that the lawsuit is successful and they redress the balance. Okay, moving to our final story this evening, and Police Scotland are to launch a national bike theft campaign. Police Scotland has launched a national campaign to tackle the rising number of bike thefts taking place across the country and to raise awareness of bike security within the cycling community. Pedal Protect officially kicked off this morning with the aim of addressing the increasing trend in bike thefts, which has been experienced throughout Scotland in the past year. It will also be supported by colleagues from British Transport Police. Despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the downward trend in various acquisitive crime offences, Police Scotland's year-to-date figures in February 2021 showed that over 4,900 reports of stolen cycles were made. This is a rise of 18% on the previous year. Often these crimes are motivated by opportunity, with those responsible taking advantage of poor or non-existent security measures in place when leaving bikes unattended or in storing them within sheds, garages and other outbuildings. In order to improve bike security, officers across the country will be hosting a range of bike marking events and will publish publicised these in the Police Scotland social media channels. In addition, the police have been engaging with bike retailers in towns and cities, and many have now agreed to provide pedal protect and bike register security information leaflets to customers who purchase a new bike. Let's take you first, Julie, on this one. Bicycle sales have apparently increased by 400% since the start of the pandemic. So maybe we should have been expecting a spike in bicycle thefts.
Yeah, the sensible money got into bikes for this lockdown, didn't it? We're constantly getting reports we've got a neighbourhood watch, which is actually a wee bit like Secret Army, to be honest. But
I love your turn of phrase, Julie.
Oh my goodness! Honestly, there's a sitcom in that neighbourhood watch, but it is a good thing. But yeah, people not just kind of careless bike theft, just opportune, actual targeted bike theft.
Yeah, organised crime.
So I don't know. I mean, if it's a symptom of poverty, probably, because do they get sold on? So I don't know.
And of course, the cost of bikes now has increased dramatically, hasn't it, Siobhan? So, I mean, a bicycle nowadays can cost anything from £200 to £2,000.
I know.
Sometimes more than that.
It just reminded me that I actually got my bike stole a couple of years ago. And to be fair, it wasn't locked up. It was just, at the side of the house. I just didn't think that anybody would steal it because it was so old and rickety. But there you go. But yes, it's. I do think that there is an element of naivety, I suppose, isn't there? And kind of, maybe he's going to steal my bike, but that's exactly what I thought. And then one day I went out and thought, where the hell's my bike gone? But yeah, bikes can be expensive for sure. And I think, as Jules was saying, as we're, as the cycling has increased so much over lockdown. Sometimes, it's just easy transport. I do think that there is an element. I know that there's organised crime and stuff, but there is an element, like Julie says, of opportunism. There's a wee bit of there it is, let's go. My sister used to live in Japan and she got her bike stole quite early on and seemingly that was just a done thing. You would just take it, then you would cycle. You would take it and cycle it for a couple of days and then just abandon it, So, and just somebody else would pick it up.
Many years ago, Siobhan, I worked on the island of Coombe, and it was considered normal if you were going home from the pub late at night and it was a bit far, just to pinch somebody's bike, ride it home, and then leave it somewhere and telephone the owner to let them know where it was. And that was considered okay because it was an island, Anyway,
just forgot to phone people.
yes, of course, let them know where the property is. Anyway, on that strange note, we need to leave you this evening. But of course, before we go, I need to remind you about our crowdfunder, which is going extremely well. Thank you to all our viewers for those who've contributed so far. So if you'd like to support us by becoming a regular supporter for £5 a month, or if you'd like to pay a single donation or even volunteer, you can do that by following the instructions at the bottom of your screen now. And that's about it from all of us here at Scotland at 7. My thanks both to Siobhan Tolland and to Julie Coombe for being excellent guests this evening. And I'll see you again next week. But from all the three of us here this evening, a very good evening to you.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. please support us if you can afford it.